The story begins in 1930, as a series of restrictions are put into action to make Hollywood a cleaner place at the hands of William Hayes.
In the early 1920s, Hollywood experienced scandals involving public figures such as Fatty Arbuckle and Olive Thomas. This caused the industry to begin to decline. Local censors were editing movies to fit local tastes, and Wall Street was growing concerned about Hollywood investments. With the film industry's reputation in danger, film producers gathered and created the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or MPPDA. In 1922, the MPPDA offered William H. Hayes the position of president. He accepted. As the previous chairman of the National Republican Committee and respected member of the Presbyterian Church, Hayes's prestigious background increased the status of the organization. He would go on to help write the Production Code, also known as the Hayes Code, an extensive set of rules with the goal of censoring content in films.
A large part of the influence on censorship in film is in the hands of the clergy, or at least it was back at the time when the Hayes Codes were created. Conservative values played a much larger role in media in the early to mid-20th century, which can prominently be seen in movies and TV shows of the time. What was and was not considered taboo in media was a reflection of societal values, and so the extent of censorship was indeed a reflection of a less progressive time. Things that were considered taboo included drugs, alcohol, violence, and most forms of sexual content. The codes matched these values, banning sexual imagery and other forms of illicit content. As a Presbyterian, Hayes' religious views influenced people's views of the code for better and for worse. Charlie Chaplin reportedly told his friends that he was against, quote, any kind of censorship, particularly against Presbyterian censorship, at a party. A prime example of clergy-based censorship predating the Hayes Codes was the Clayton Moving Picture Censorship Bill. This was also the first real example of censorship in the film industry, at least in tangible legislation. After the introduction of sound to films in the late 1920s and before stricter censorship in 1934, films took a more experimental and mature route. This era was called pre-code Hollywood, and it was struck down by the harsh restrictions of the enforced Hayes Code. The ensuing films were heavily edited and fit the more conservative values of many higher-ups at the time. This went on for decades. Many directors struggled to work with the censorship until around came Alfred Hitchcock.
Before Psycho, Hitchcock was already a renowned director, with works such as Dial M for Murder and North by Northwest under his belt. But Psycho shocked viewers with a new side of Hitchcock. In previous films, Hitchcock often used subtlety to slip innuendos past the logistics of the code.
Want a leg or a breast?
You make the choice.
However, Hitchcock created Psycho to be direct and obvious with his viewers. One of the most well-known examples of this is the shower scene. In it, the character Marion Crane is stabbed to death by killer Norman Bates in room 1 of the Bates Motel. With this one scene, Hitchcock broke 2 rules of the Hayes Code. Complete nudity is never permitted, and brutal killings are not to be presented in detail. Because of this scene, Psycho was flagged down by censors, and Hitchcock was forced to re-edit parts of it. But because of the negotiator's tool of overkill, Hitchcock was able to retain the essential elements of the scene and create the same emotional impact. Hitchcock's use of quick cuts to break up the scene causes the viewer to fill in the gaps of the action. There are no shots of a knife-piercing skin or of Marion's full naked body. She actually wore a moleskin around parts of her body.
Put that over parts of your body, then, everything's copacetic.
The moleskin worked so well that the censors reviewing the scene were conflicted on whether Marion was naked or not. The intense music and sound effects, coupled with the quick succession of over 70 shots, creates the illusion of actual nudity and stabbing in the viewer's mind.
Yeah, the average movie I think I've read is made up of about 600 separate shots. Would that be true?
Well, the shower scene in Psycho, the knife never touched the body at all. Mm-hmm. It was just this fast cutting from one thing to another, the knife coming at the camera and so forth.
Thus, even though Hitchcock had to edit parts out, the scene remains shocking to viewers. Psycho would go on to receive the MPPDA seal of approval and was released to mainstream theaters. Not only did Hitchcock revolutionize the American film industry with Psycho, he changed the theater etiquette of the time. It was common for people to enter theaters mid-movie due to double features, but Hitchcock requested for theaters to not admit anyone after Psycho began playing, which was a first for mainstream theaters. The ads for the film enforced this wish, with claims of force against those who tried to enter mid-movie. In cities such as New York, Hitchcock even hired guards for the theater.
This, of course, is to help you enjoy Psycho more. We really have only your enjoyment in mind.
In addition to changing how viewers experience the beginning of the film, Hitchcock also had a request for theater managers regarding the end of the film. He suggested that they keep the theater dark for a half a minute after the movie's end, so that it may be properly ingrained in the audience's memory. Through this, Hitchcock not only changed what content audiences were watching, he also changed how they viewed and experienced it. By coupling his more graphic content with time for audiences to linger on his films, Hitchcock was taking great strides to change the industry's tolerance of mature content.
Other films began to demonstrate this change alongside Psycho. To quote Michael Brook, a film scholar, in 1966, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, directed by Mike Nichols, was released to huge critical and commercial success, but it also blatantly infringed guidelines set out by the Hays Code. The release of this and other similar films made it clear that the old system had broken down irretrievably. As societal values began to shift into a more progressive era, the movie industry followed suit, developing a more flexible rating system. By the mid-60s, changes in culture and social norms rendered current guidelines inadequate. The new MPAA rating system was officially introduced in November of 1968.
Jim Rex? What's Jim Rex? Would you believe a movie audience guide presented as a public service by this theater's management to help you select your motion picture entertainment? Well, that's what it is. And we urge you to learn these rating symbols and use them as a guide for you and your family.
G, suggested for general audiences. M, suggested for mature audiences, parental discretion advised. R, or restricted, persons under 16 not admitted unless accompanied by a parent or adult guardian. X, persons under 18 will not be admitted. While the Hays Code focused on ensuring that every kind of film was appropriate for every kind of viewer, the new rating system focused more on categorizing and letting people find a good match for themselves. The X rating was originally supposed to be respectable, but due to the fact that the MPAA didn't trademark it, it was grabbed by the porn industry in the 70s and has retained a sexual connotation to this day. The rating system we use today has come a long way from where it began, and its transformation is a direct mirror of the metamorphosis that societal values underwent.
Psycho led the charge against the Hays Office's restrictions on movie makers. Most of the people behind the Hays Office were not individuals with a passion for filmmaking, but rather company heads that gained power and saw movies as merely a source of money. Their goal was to maximize profits through ensuring films could be viewed by all, but these rules would not have accounted for the societal changes happening in years to come. Of course, Hitchcock's revolutionary work in the film industry with Psycho was only the first step towards a more inclusive and expansive Hollywood. Later films would continue to break barriers ranging from sexuality on the big screen to clever advertising techniques. Without Psycho and the necessary changes made in American movie censorship, movies today would not be able to explore important topics in the modern and historical world. Many films, ranging from comedies to serious commentaries, would not be shown in mainstream theaters. Psycho was one of the first among other vital works that paved the way for future films to take in-depth looks at meaningful themes and topics for the modern audience.